this is the kind of
because we've been chaotically running an event. Who knew? So you want to host an event is also starting.
I can go yell that.
Yeah. I mean, she did already, but we're actually starting now. I swear we are. There you go. Oh, there's more.
Sorry? So you're real.
I am. So she's one of the most well-known right.
Oh no.
I mean, okay, I guess there's others.
I'm a tiny YouTuber.
Like more.
But I do a lot of videos. Like I think I'm reaching over 1,000 now. Not publicly on this channel, but over several. Yeah. That's really good.
I think it's a weird feeling too. It's a little like, oh, people are interested in what I have to say.
Yeah, so actually, I think that people telling me that my prizes is important.
We do have prizes. They have prizes as well. They gotta go grab.
Because the numbers are so low, and the money is so low. But when people come to me and tell me that my work impacted them, this is best.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
Oh my goodness.
get a
Okay, we're ready. I swear we are.
I'm ready.
Almost. Almost ready. Almost ready. Okay, actually, just before you sit down, can you make sure that everybody gets a raffle ticket, please?
Yes, sir.
They're over there.
All right.
And we'll have some. Yeah. Right over there. Right there. Yeah. We're the ones sitting out front. So, the first key to hosting a very good event is having excellent staff. Especially if you're a chaotic individual like me. All right. So Joyce is going to come around with some raffle tickets for you. You're keeping the other half, right?
Yes.
Do you want a bag for that?
Sure, that would be super helpful for you.
Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you. So, you want to host an event, do you?
So like I have a feeling that most people have had experience hosting like small events.
Who has hosted an event?
I mean,
Okay.
I guess our anniversaries don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you hosted ILD,
Completely
that
new to
counts.
hosting an event? Never hosted one before, wants to learn? Love it,
All right.
love it, okay.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of people are new and interested. So we'll start at the easy, the basic. Let's go out for, food with your friends. Obviously, you make a reservation, and if it's like 5 people, that's really easy to do.
You might not even have to call ahead.
Yeah, you probably don't even have to call ahead if you're doing like 5 people. If you're doing 10 people, you definitely will. And if you're doing 20 people, you have to call ahead at least 2 weeks in advance. Otherwise, they're not going to have the staff to be able to feed everybody. So you need to make sure that you're doing that, which is, it seems like basic logic, but like that's an important step there. If you're doing a larger event, you want to make sure that you're thinking about like, hey, I have 20 people, maybe I want to do a prize. This is a ticketed event. So if I'm just covering the cost of food, then I can't have any prizes unless they're donated. So in the past, I've done ILD, International Lolita Day. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that, but I don't want to assume. I've done ILDs where we just went to the old mill for the non-locals. That's a smaller but very nice venue that has an inexpensive tea and can usually accommodate a large group. And in order to cover prizes that I bought, I raised the ticket price a little bit. So for the last few ILDs I did, it was about $5. And $5 over 40 people means you have $200 worth of prizes. And sometimes people will hear that you're doing an event and they'll be like, hey, I want to get involved. I can't come to the event, but can I give you, some makeup that I've received as a prize from something else that I can't use, and you can raffle it off, or something like that. For me, for the most part, my goal is always to break even at events.
Yes.
You don't want to intentionally go into the red. Conventions are an entirely different thing, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you want to always aim to break even, and you want to kind of like plan your budget ahead of time. Like how much money do you personally have to put down to secure the event space? Do you have to add a room if you are doing a larger space? So if you're doing 40-person tea and catering or the restaurant can't accommodate you if you're doing it at a hotel, so now you have to go through the catering department. And catering usually requires that you rent a private room, and then they have a different menu scheme that you need to look into.
It's a really good overview of like high-level events for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe if you don't mind, can I take it back to like the first event I ever hosted?
Yes, you absolutely can.
The first thing that I did that was like super low barrier to entry was a Hyde Park Cherry Blossoms meet. A little bit of a newbie moment for me because I was brand new to the community, so I didn't recognize how many folks in Toronto might be stopping, asking us for photos. So that's something to consider if you're going to be meeting in a public place, for sure. I've also done a meetup where we rented out a part of the park, like you rent a pavilion by calling the Toronto City, and that's a really good way to secure your area. And that was for, I think I had a tea party in the park. I think that was our first after lockdown meet, so that was really exciting. Wanted to make sure it was outdoor. One of the things for outdoor venues, whether or not you're planning a meal or not, be considerate of bugs. Like maybe get some citronella going, or you know,
Wasps, you gotta watch out for.
Yeah, bringing blankets is always a good idea for folks to like sit down on the grass so they don't ruin their Lolita. But a lot of these things are super low barrier to entry. You don't really have to invest a lot. You can always arrange like a potluck with your friends and everybody can bring a little meal. One of the things I like to do when I'm organizing a potluck is say, you're gonna do savory, you're gonna do sweet, you're gonna drink cups, drinks, blah, blah, blah. Just so that everybody's not bringing desserts, which usually happens.
Or alcohol, depending on.
Yeah.
There was that one meet.
Yeah, so let's go to that meet. Yeah, so I was so grateful I hosted a swap meet at my house.
Sorry, I've tangented on you. I did want to add on to the park meets.
Oh yeah.
In Toronto, especially downtown Toronto, if you have a outside meet that's over 25 people, you actually need a permit for it. So that's a good thing to look into, depending on where you're in. Like the park meet that you did before, it was in Etobicoke, where it doesn't have that bylaw. So you always want to look into your local bylaw, and that's usually to prevent people from having impromptu. I think protests don't need it, but any kind of large gathering you do need, I think it's like a $25 permit. So
yeah,
that's,
it's very
again,
cheap.
Something you need to kind of like either eat the cost, or so if it's ticketed at all, you gotta.
Going back to that meet, because I had to rent the space for the park, and I also decided because it was COVID, I wanted to make sure everybody had their own food set. So I included like a food ticket in the price and the cost of the venue and some of the decorations, and I think it ended up being like a $15 ticket.
Yeah, that's very affordable.
Thank you. So yeah, any questions about low barrier to entry, like park meets, before we move on to more intermediate stuff? Awesome.
As I continue to get ready for
Right? Yeah, I was getting ready on the streetcar on the way here, and I was staring. I was like, it's okay, it takes minutes to be fabulous. So for intermediate level meets, like for me, I had a party room in my condo, so I was able to speak with the land people and say like, how much is this going to cost to rent out the party room for this many hours, and I kind of looked at like how much space we have, how many Lolitas could come. When you're planning for your number of people for your event, I would say cut it by a third, because petticoats take up at least a third of a person. So if it says 200, maybe shoot for 150, 160 total, you know what I mean? And also with heat, right? A lot of us are wearing a lot of layers, so we want to make sure that if we can get a climate controlled venue with AC, that's always helpful. Get a fan going, stuff like that. But yeah, so for that meet that I rented the condo party thing, I did a bit of a potluck slash, it was also right above a metro, so I got a bunch of little deli thingies. And that went really well for my first large meet. I also learned a lot because there was, that was the first meet that I hosted with like over 100 people, and it can get really overwhelming really fast. Like 100 people on paper doesn't feel like 100 Lolitas in person. So one of the things I learned the hard way was making sure that we have our policies out ahead of time. like no outside alcohol. If you're underage, don't drink the outside alcohol that someone brought.
Yeah.
If you are deciding to imbibe, especially if there's like a tea party that has champagne, know your limits, you know? Like just keep it cool, keep it classy.
Don't let certain individuals green or black you out. That was that party room at your place.
Yeah. There was at least 2 or 3 people in the bathroom. I was like, girl, I love that you had
overall.
So
that one person.
So
one
for
thing
intermediate,
overall is there's a lot of things that even your best planning,
you'll never know, right?
You will not have thought about it until it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
So you'll come up against it, and in the moment you have to make a decision about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the wrong decision, and you kind of just have to live with that.
You're only
do
human,
the
right?
best you can. Yeah.
Another reason why it's great to have staff, especially if it's even just you and a friend running a small meet, even if it's not staff, but at least you have someone else to help you. So you're not running around so much. Yeah, exactly.
Because like one thing I've learned from Kei-con is I can't run the social media.
No,
I can't
it's
do it by myself. It's too much.
Yeah.
But also just responding to messages. I'm really terse in text. I'm extremely vocal while talking in person, but I don't have time. I don't have patience for texting. So like I gotta get somebody on that, and that's one of our notes for next year.
Totally. Another intermediate style meet you kind of talked about was making a restaurant reservation.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that worth considering with a large group. Sometimes they will ask that you pay ahead of time. Like for example, when I go to karaoke with the friends here, we go to Bar Plus where you can rent out a room. So for my planning, I always plan for the largest room because I bet a lot of people are going to show up. So I see how much the room costs. I break it down by how many Lolitas will fit in there comfortably with petticoats and such. And I divide the room cost plus if I feel like I want to cater or whatever, the food cost as well, divided by the number of Lolitas that could come. That can sometimes lead for a little bit of like, if not a lot of people are interested, usually people will let you downsize your reservation, but they usually don't like if you cancel outright. So definitely making sure
they also usually have cutoffs for that.
Yeah, so like, covering your bases and having like a deadline for your meet when you're posting it to let people know, hey, I won't be able to help you past this date. You know, if you paid for it, you need to sort it out with your friends if someone else wants to take your spot. With the sunk cost thing, sometimes there is stuff that has to be purchased ahead of time that you just are kind of stuck with. People are left without it, which can be fun.
Yeah. One other thing is, like you talked a bit about like cutoff dates. In Southern Ontario Lolitas, we have a policy that anything where the restaurant has like a certain number of people or the organizer, especially if it's like the organizer is paying for everything and that's coming off of their card, you have to pay in advance, and we have a wait list. So you can't just mark yourself as going on the Facebook event. You have to actively comment on it, I am going, and if you can't go, then you need to tell the organizer you can't go, and usually they'll have a cutoff, which is determined by the restaurant or whatever the venue is, their cutoff. And either there's a wait list for it afterwards, or if you do not inform the organizer and it's something that they had to put money down, or it's a very popular event where somebody else could have gone if you had informed the organizer, then you're actually blacklisted from RSVPing to events for a while. And we have that in place because for a while we used to only do casual meets, and a whole bunch of people would say they were coming and then no one would show up, or only 1 or 2 people would say they were coming, and then we'd have 30 people at a restaurant. Like one of the restaurants we used to go to a lot was Cafe Princess, and we used to do sort of like a casual drop-in meet once a month, and the organizer for that didn't even live in the city anymore. She just put up the event, and then if people showed up, they showed up, and if they didn't show up, they didn't show up. And that was fine for a while.
And the community exploded.
Until, well, the community exploded. We had a little bit of drama way back in 2013, 2014, where there was a split between Southern Ontario Lolitas and Toronto Ontario Lolitas because a friend group had a falling out. So an additional, we ended up with 2 communities that were basically covering Toronto for a little while. But
we all amalgamated.
we amalgamated back, and there was sort of like, this is tangenting. There was a little bit of an us versus them thing, but we were all the same people in both communities. It was really weird.
So it's just to like kind of recap,
sorry, the point I'm getting to is there was an event that was hosted through Toronto, Ontario Lolitas, which was actually before Laura lived in Toronto, lovely Laura. Before she lived in Toronto, she'd come to visit, and they held it at Cafe Princess, but they didn't do any of the sort of like the checks and balances that we usually do in the Southern Ontario Lolita community. So they had like 35 people show up to this small cafe. The cafe is not much bigger than this room. So it was too many people and too many petticoats. And there was somebody doing nails. Somebody had like a gel nail kit.
What?
That's
wild.
why we got banned from Cafe Princess, was because of this meet. And it wasn't just, they didn't know that it was a different group of Lolitas. They just knew it was those people who dress like that. And then everybody, all like 900 of us in Toronto, were not allowed to go to that cafe for a number of years.
Yeah, we just
I think we're good now.
Back,
I think everybody who worked there that we pissed off is they've gone to other things now. They've forgiven us eventually.
The staff has switched over enough. Nobody knows.
So, but like that's one of the reasons why you want to have sort of like those checks and balances, and also you're responsible for everybody who's coming to your event, how they behave. And it's like anytime you're out in public in Lolita, you represent the entire community because you're the first person they've ever met with it.
I was gonna say, so that's a really great point about like what the rules are in your comm and what's already been laid out for you. So for Southern Ontario Lolitas, which by the way, I think pretty much anyone in Kei-con is technically part of the community in a way because they're here.
So Kei-con is currently not a Southern Ontario Lolitas event.
True.
But in future years, we will be honoring the bands that have happened through Southern Ontario Lolitas. The Montreal Com, Toronto Harajuku. Anyhow, that's a different story.
Most communities will have little documents in their Facebook groups or things like that where you're going to be able to like see resources that people have put together. They might be outdated. Like a lot of the resources that I've seen when I was getting into Lolita were from like 2013, 2012. So a lot's changed since then, for sure, as far as like going out and things. Thanks 2020. But yeah, that's a really good point of just being mindful of if you're hosting a meet, you're responsible for all the people at the meet. Yeah. Any questions about like intermediate level meets before we move on to hosting a convention?
I don't have so much of a question as a point. Since I'm the admin of Michigan Com.
Oh, cool.
And so what we do is when it's something where it requires like a reservation and a pool of people in advance, we set our deadline for buying a spot a week or two ahead of the actual restaurant deadline.
Great point.
Because LST is real.
Yes.
And it affects everything around.
Lolita standard time. Yeah.
Because you always have that one person who like the day after it closes is like, oh, can I join? And I'm like, no, like you had a month.
Yeah, but that's why it's great to have wait lists and things like that. If somebody drops out, they can fill the spot.
And honestly, that's actually a really, really good point. We had that running International Lolita Day. I think the last time we ran it before we started running Kei-con. I had a whole bunch of people. I had put up my email address so people could e-transfer me. And I had people just e-transfer me without telling me who it was for or reserving a spot. So like I had one or two people e-transfer me money who didn't sign up for the wait list, who like the wait list was full and they sent me money and I'm like, no, there's no spots. Like literally I cannot get a larger room. We already have the largest room that the venue will give us. So like there is no space, I have to send your money back. But because they e-transferred me and I didn't know them, I couldn't give their money back. I had to go find like the friend of the friend and give that friend cash and be like, this goes back to this person. I am marshalling you because this person is actually not even in the group.
See, I feel like that's an idiot tax. I'm keeping that.
I'm too nice about people's money for my own good.
It's a big deal.
Which is why we have a no refunds policy, but I refunded everybody who asked anyways, and that's a different story. Don't be like me. Hold on, like honor your refund policy, because it gets messy.
From my perspective, I remember International Lolita Day was one of the biggest events that we had outside of Anime North.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why Kei-con exists is because Anime North has had less and less and less fashion content.
Yeah.
So it's a really great way for us to kind of like make it what we want.
Yeah. That, and like, I also like, I have ADHD. This is a new thing for me. I've just recently realized that this is why I think that running a business, a convention, teaching 2 to 3 days a week, and then also working a full-time job is a reasonable thing for me to do.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I need a lot of staff to keep me on task and sorted. Speaking of which, I forget where I was going with that.
No worries.
But overcommitment is real.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's the point that I was making.
If I can kind of riff off of that, I remember when you were first putting Kei-con together, we were so excited as a community. We had no idea what to expect. And I feel like so many of us were just so buzzing with so much happy energy that this is actually a thing that we can do, an alternative fashion convention. There's one specific moment I remember at the end of the day with the tea party. Everyone was so tired and our guests were so nice. And there were some of us that realized that like there was a bit of a cluster F with the allergies in the tea party. So some of us just kind of stepped up and we were like, Ray, you gotta sit, you gotta eat, we got this. So a lot of those people have turned into the staff for this event because it's just like genuine care and stuff. And the cool thing that Ray's done is recognized each of the people's talents. So for me, I was in charge of the swap meet because I've done swap meets. And for example, like social media people are social media people, yada yada. The artist is the artist, but also the chaos crafter in general.
And just, it's all good.
Yeah. There's so many things more outside of a meetup to consider when you're hosting a convention, like sunk cost for
let's start with that. Let's start with new topic.
Yes.
Kei-con. So, like you said, when I first started Kei-con, what I was expecting was it was going to be just kind of like a bigger intermediate meet, but also a convention, and we were going to have a craft room. Hopefully next year, because my partnership coordinator is awesome, and she's like, I'm going to find the funding. I'm going to make it happen. We are definitely doing 2025.
Sasha?
Sorry, Sasha.
Oh, you already answered my question about, in terms of like financing and stuff, and next year, like future plans.
We do really, I've already reached out to some of the guests that we want to have for next year, and they're on board, so like we are, or not next year, but 2025. We're starting to make it happen, and we're starting to make plans. We just need a little financial security so that I don't end up homeless.
Yeah, I'm someone who's not very great at budgeting, and that's one of the problems I've run into a couple times. Is you gotta have the money to front it before you can reserve it sometimes. So that's a bit of a rough spot.
Like some people are able to fund them through Kickstarter over a couple of years.
That's an idea.
Or GoFundMe, but again, it doesn't have to be. If we wanted to run in 2024, we would have had to have been crowdsourcing since last year because it's pretty hard to get people to put down $30K to run an event that they may or not be able to go to. Yeah. So it's very, and like that's a very big financial burden to ask of the entire community for an event that you can't guarantee you'll run if you don't have the full financing for. So I don't like that. I also, just as a little aside, I grew up super duper poor. I hate asking people for money. Like these guys actually had to bully me into making the Ko-fi because I'm like, you are not allowed to ask people for money. If we are not giving them anything, you are not allowed to ask people for money. And that was like, you have to do this. You have to pay your rent. Ask people for money, you silly thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
You put so much love and effort into this, you deserve to pay your bills and feed yourself and have a place. Okay, so just real quick, running a convention is a big task, definitely has a lot of moving parts. Start with a small meet if you, don't run a convention as your first meet, that's a lot. Also, don't run a 150-person swap meet at your condo for your first meet. Like, that was my mistake.
Start with 10 people. 10 people, that's enough, especially if you get stressed by people needing things from you and not being able to immediately fix the problems.
One thing I forgot to mention is a lot of people host private meets, so you don't have to open it up to your whole community. If you have a friend, a couple friends that are your frilly friends, like we have a person in our community who makes these excellent homemade tea parties with a menu and decorations and everything. She's just so passionate about cooking.
Actually, if you're on the Discord, you've probably seen her. It's Carly or Voldy.
Yeah.
Voldy is the person, and she has like menus and everything.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.